very, very warm today. I don't know if you can see on the camera just how wet with sweat my back is. This is one of my first concerns about spending a night in the bivvy bag after a day of this temperature. I'm already soaked, and if there's one thing bivvy bags are known for, it's condensation. Whew. I don't know if you can tell, but that is darker than this. Considering that's got my water in and is wet to the touch. Oh, look at that. The lid's popped off. How much water have I got? I've decided to skip the rest of that water video because after the day I'd had, I went on a little bit of a rant about how cursed this whole trip had been. My goodness me, this is a pleasant place to be right now, my friends. It has been one of the hottest days I have ever known in my life today. And just to be here with the general shade and cool of the woodland, the sun setting and just disappearing behind the shoulder of the hillside here, and just generally to be in absolute silence and peace apart from a few cars in the distance. That's just absolutely fantastic. Oh, so my original plan for today was to do a mega walk. I'm talking to camp overnight in the middle of about an 18-mile circular route where we were going to see everything from the canal to Dinnisbran Castle ruins to woodlands to hilltops and historic sites and old burial mounds and all sorts. Unfortunately, it just so happened to be the hottest day I can possibly ever remember in my life. At one point, when I took the thermometer out of my backpack and laid it on the ground and on a seat that wasn't hot in particular, it was literally off the dial above 30 degrees. That was an important moment then. I don't know if you heard that, there was a cyclist going by. But even though I have good visual cover from the nearby footpaths, probably don't have very good audio cover. Unfortunately, I spent a lot of my evening like this, sat in absolute still silence because there were so many voices and noises and dogs barking and all sorts of creaking and crackling in the woodlands. You may notice I'm eating something even simpler than normal in this video, and that's because given the extreme heat, the dryness and the wildfires all over the UK, I would consider it nothing short of reckless to light my Trangia stove in a place like this with so much dead dry wood around. Good grief. I tell you what, I've been looking forward to this. It will probably come as no shock to many of you to know that this moment right here is about the absolute peak experience in life as far as I'm concerned. I've been that busy running around like a fool for the last few weeks that just sat there completely surrounded by nature, nothing but the birds in the trees, absolutely fantastic. But I must come clean. Although this video's been edited to be nice and calm to watch, there were two things that put me on high alert, which made me so cautious on this trip and so keen to leave at the first sign of anything strange. Firstly, this is a different area, but of the same woodland where 2 months or so ago you may have seen my video where somebody was searching for me by torchlight. Secondly, and of more concern to me at that particular moment, there's been multiple accounts on Facebook of somebody potentially rough sleeping in the area who's been saying stuff and approaching members of the public in a way that may suggest they have some problems or crisis going on. I would often put these type of stories down to general Facebook anecdotal chatter. However, you may have seen my videos over the last few months where I've said I'm sure I've disturbed somebody in the woodlands at night. And while I was recording a piece to camera about a month ago, somebody meeting the exact description and carrying a similar item stopped about 20 feet from me and just watched me in silence for a few minutes. Unfortunately, in this day and age, you can never be too cautious and careful, especially if you're planning on sleeping alone in the woods, wrapped up in a bag. Okay, my friends, you can probably tell we've got a nice evening chorus going on now. However, I've just had to sit down and stay silent for about 5 minutes or so because somewhere down there, and it's a bit of a brow of a hill here and looks like it's quite a steep drop off, But somewhere down there, somebody has been walking around at length. And I was only really alerted because while I was playing around with the tarp poncho, you know, this is actually quite spooky in many respects. I don't know if you heard all of that clattering and breaking of twigs then, but yeah, I knew somebody was down in that region because they were shouting a dog. And so of course the last thing I want to do after what happened a few weeks ago is raise the alarm of a dog and have anybody going, what is my dog doing over there? Oh, there's a human. But I have a horrible feeling there's a lot more over there than I'd anticipated, like a track or something like that maybe. So as it's getting darker and darker by the moment, the only thing that's happened in the last 10 to 15 minutes is I've added a little bit of cordage to the corner points of this little tarp shelter. And to be honest, I'm getting a little bit freaked out by a lot of noise. Finding this piece of discarded litter only a few feet from my campsite was an indication that people were either rough sleeping or camping in this area, because having to have a proper pack of puppy food would suggest that somebody's out here with a dog for long enough that they need to give them proper meals. This I am proud of, my very simple tarp setup idea. Now this was only a really simple 2 by 1.4 metre poncho tarp, so a very small tarp, but I attached a piece of rotten broken wood to each one of the guy lines on the corner facing the wall, and literally just dropped them over the other side, so it meant I could pull this shelter up, and I had a couple of extra feet of guy line so I could pull it well away from the wall as well, although unfortunately we simply just never got the opportunity to with how the evening unfolded. But it basically meant that I was causing no damage to the wall, I was attaching nothing to the wall, and more significantly, if for any reason that tarp came tumbling down, it wouldn't be fetching a load of stones and bricks on top of me as I lay asleep as well. Now, my view on this is that even though this wall is completely crumbling in multiple places, has trees crashing into it and knocking it over all over the place, to me, I like to think that we're the stewards of these half-forgotten places, and I like the idea that I'm keeping it as intact as it ever was. Even if a tree falls on it tomorrow and completely wrecks the area, I know that I've done my bit for the next generation of people to see the ancient walls slowly disappear into history. Unfortunately though, you may have gathered from my stance in the video clip that there is ever more disturbance around me that's getting closer and closer to camp. I'm doing this super quick because I want to get out of here as soon as humanly possible, but there's been a dog rummaging around in this undergrowth here, and when I came looking and sneaking a glimpse over the top, somewhere, I couldn't even tell you where the ground is down there at the minute, but there was a brief glimpse of a chap that was like looking at a mirror image of myself as another outdoorsy looking character. But what I've noticed is that's actually a track, and if you pay more attention here you can see the moss has been worn off. It might not be massively trodden, but you can see there's clear signs, and especially when you look at the camp, how obvious is this now? Moss everywhere, but a lot of this debris is completely clear and has had footsteps on it clearing that bit of moss. At this point, I think not only was I obviously concerned about who had been hanging around down there for goodness knows how long, and of course for what purpose, but also I was just absolutely ready to give up and sick and tired of a really long day full of hassle where even before coming out to this site I'd walked for miles in the beating sun for no reason, and I was just so ready to be done with it. And so that's what happened. And then when I was on the other side of the wall, I also noticed at that entrance there was a refillable drinks bottle, and I was just like, I don't know if that's left as a marker, I don't know if it's just fallen out of someone's bag, but it's another sign that people are in this very specific area that I am trying to sleep tonight. You may notice this final shot isn't as well framed as the others, and that's because, unbelievably, to add insult to injury, when I picked my tripod up off the ground, the bottom part of it fell off and I couldn't use it properly. Look at this though, even in the incredibly frustrating circumstances, I even tried to leave no trace to the extent of putting the logs back in the same position. In a comment on a recent video, somebody accused me of going looking for trouble, and I just thought at the time, you really don't get it, do you? Not everybody can afford to go off out into the proper hills and wilderness where you've got all of the space in the world shared amongst very few people. And not everybody can afford to take the car for a day or two from other people who may need to use it to go filming these things. So unfortunately, somebody like myself is stuck largely filming around places that you're far more likely to bump into people. Of course, where I can reasonably get to and from, often just by the power of my boots alone. Saying that, however, stay tuned for next week when I go a little further into the hills, where if I really do bump into anybody out there, I will be going, well, I just give up, let's just all stay indoors. I'm camping in the garden next time. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little excursion. Please do subscribe and check out my other videos for loads more in the great outdoors. If you really want to help me out, consider becoming a PayPal supporter, a channel member, a Facebook subscriber, leaving a super thanks and so on, just like some of my recent supporters: Steve B, John B, Melissa L, Sean B, BL Beach, L Hughes, Dawn H, A Sanford, T Seymour, David D and Kaz G. Thank you very much, everybody. As I've said before, it really means a huge amount to me, and it really does help out. Until the next time, keep it interesting, keep it weirdness in the woods worthy. Have a fantastic day, and of course, my friends, farewell.